What's up, everyone? Back for another episode of Locked On Bucks. As Milwaukee, they're down in Florida. They're escaping the increasing cold weather in Wisconsin. They're down in Miami. They're going to play the Heat the second time these two teams have played in a week. So we'll be able to break that one down. There's going to be some big names missing. So this is going to be opportunity for the Bucks to pick up another win. Outside of that, we're starting to approach trade season. There is more and more trade chatter around the league. Even Bucks Twitter's getting involved in this. So we're going to talk about a few of the scenarios, not necessarily to do with the Bucks, but of course, as always, you've got to be watching what the other teams are doing at the top of the East. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show daily and also find my work over at ESPN. And joining me is my good friend from the Bucks Radio Network, Justin Garcia. We just realized we didn't even podcast last week. I think that is the first week we haven't podcasted in years. Legitimately, it might be years, but you're back here. We're very thankful for it. And today's episode is brought to you by Truebill. Truebill is a new app that saves you money by helping you identify and stop paying for the subscriptions you don't want or need, and can even negotiate better deals on those you want to keep. And as always, we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of every single day. Like I said yesterday, you guys are reminding me that you're sending me screenshots. You're praising me for me Built Bar reads. So it's all happy days in Locked On Bucks land right now. And Justin, it's happy days for you as well. You're in the arena. You're at all these home games. The 3 seasons I was there, or 2.5 seasons with the pandemic, we got very, very used to the Bucks just winning every single time we went to go watch them play at Fiserv Forum. And fortunately, in the last few weeks, it feels like we're back in that comfortable position where the Bucks' big name players are out on the floor for the most part, and they're back winning games. I imagine it's a more enjoyable experience going to watch the Bucks games.
Funny how that works. Even in the beginning of the season, there was obviously the injuries to point to, but the team, what they did early in the year, they beat Brooklyn. And then it was, 4 or 5 straight that they lost at home prior to the start of that 5-game homestand that they went perfect on. They had a winless homestand, which, 3 games only, but still you had to think like, man, when was the last time they did this? So between not dominating at home, the injuries, being towards the bottom and in the play-in tournament, I know it's way too early to get into that, but all of it just felt like something isn't right here. And now all is right in the world where the starters, for the most part, are back. We saw more and more of Dante DiVincenzo before the game just the other day. So between that and him being assigned to the herd and everything else, it feels like it's a matter of days or weeks before he makes his return. And the Bucks just keep winning against the Central Division, which is the telltale sign that all is right in the world.
Was my stat accurate on yesterday's pod? 38 straight with
38,
Giannis?
yeah, including the playoffs. Yep.
Absolutely not. So 38 straight wins against Central Division opponents with Giannis in the lineup. And of course, there is a bunch of subpar teams in the Central Division, and divisions really mean nothing anyway, but it's still a ridiculous stat. You would think somewhere along the line there you'll have an off
one
night
of those games, yeah.
Yeah,
like one of those games, one of these teams is going to hit 23s or something, and it's just, hey, remember the time that they lost to the Cavs on a buzzer beater? The fact that it's going on 3 years that hasn't happened is insane.
It is. Tomorrow, or today, probably as you're listening to this, we're recording this late on Tuesday night Central Time. So the Bucks play Miami again, and a quick note when it comes to the injury report, Jimmy Butler is out. Bam Adebayo is out. Obviously, Victor Oladipo has been out all season long. Morris is out as well. It still says whiplash. I'm still wondering if this is more a little embarrassment. He wants to extend his absence off the floor because he's embarrassed about the way things panned out with Nikola Jokic. But Morris is off the floor as well there. So Miami completely banged up, and I know that it's always a difficult place to play, and they've had a night there, Justin. They've had a night in Miami. I always say we're not dealing with a bunch of party animals here on the Milwaukee Bucks. I feel pretty confident in saying that, but it's the old running joke. You don't want to have a night in Miami before you play. But this, honestly, if you just look at the personnel, this is a game the Bucks should win. We know they're without Lopez. Dante DiVincenzo obviously is out. Shemi Ojeleye is out. George Hill is questionable at this point. But ultimately, all things considered, this is a game that the Bucks should bank and win.
Miami and Phoenix are the two where you don't want to have the night off going into the game, the South Beach flu that we've seen. But no, this is the way things have started to break for the Bucks. It's almost where you dealt with the lumps early, and then things just have a way of evening themselves out. Where as soon as the Bucks started that win streak, and really prior to that as well, you start to see things start to shift into their favor. And think back to that game against the Nuggets, where you didn't have to face anybody on that team, really. And the Bucks had started to get some of these benefits and breaks going their way after playing, look back at some of the lineups they played the first time against Miami. And right around that point where you were thinking, man, why Sandro Mamukelashvili? I did not have him pegged for 19 minutes this early in the season, or Justin Robinson. So now what the Bucks had, if you look at it in waves, once they got healthy, you looked at the schedule and you kind of noted or made note of, it kind of makes sense just based off the timeline we see for most guys that go in health and safety protocols, except for LeBron, apparently. It kind of makes sense that Chris would come out right around the time of the homestand in that Lakers game for various reasons. And that's what's happened. And you looked at the schedule and thought, this is a really, really easy schedule they have in front of them. It's a good opportunity to get above 500, start to climb the standings. That's exactly what they did. Now you look at the schedule that they really started the last couple of games, and that's here basically until the first week of January when they play the Nets. There's a lot of those teams that are kind of in the middle of the Eastern Conference and a lot of really bad teams in the East and West. You got the Magic on there a couple of times. You got the Rockets. I know they've won 6 in a row, but you got the Rockets on there a couple of times and the Pistons. So now the Bucks went from climbing the standings and getting back into where they are now to now it's a pretty golden opportunity to put some distance between yourselves and those teams that are 4, 5, 6 and lower, especially with Miami, with 2 games against them in the span of a week here. And with these health issues that the Heat have, I mean, there's a really good chance that this time next week we're looking at it and saying, well, the Bucks are currently 2 games up on the Heat. They could be 4 games or 5 games between themselves and whoever it is that's 4th or even 3rd if they keep climbing in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, game and a half behind the Brooklyn Nets for the 1 seed. Currently, the Bucks, as you pointed to, Miami for the rest of the calendar year. This is the crazy thing about it. We're just a week into December, but for the rest of the calendar year, the only team that the Bucks will play that, as it stands right now, is more than 2 games over 500 is Miami, and they're extremely banged up, and they're probably not going to be able to maintain that moving forward. So essentially, the Bucks are playing no one that is a better than 500 team right now for the rest of the calendar month. And it's important because, look, let's face it, we're waking up, or I'm waking up certainly in Australia every single day, and you've gone through the day of the news cycle in the NBA, and there's more players in health and safety protocol. Like this is going to happen. The Bucks probably are going to go through their own issues with this again. Fingers crossed it doesn't happen. Hopefully that's not the case. But as we've said right from the start of this season, that's why picking up as many of these wins as you can early in the season. And if you get a chance to go on a bit of a stretch, as the Bucks have 10 of 11, make the most of it. And if they can go into the new year, remember, it was only a couple of weeks ago where I was saying, based on the injuries, that if you can get to the new year at around 500, you're going to be very happy. All of a sudden, you're like, okay, well, they have a real opportunity to be 10 games over 500 plus at the turn of the new year, which is just absolutely absurd.
There's 15 games, counting the game against the Heat. There's 15 games between then and when the Bucks go to Brooklyn to take on the Nets the first week of January. And that's where the schedule kind of starts to tick upward, as you have the Nets, you have the Warriors shortly after, you got the Hawks, you got the Bulls for the first time. But in those 15 games, I mentioned there's 2 against the Magic, there's 2 against the Rockets, the Pelicans are on there. You get the Cavs again. There's really no reason why you wouldn't say the Bucks couldn't or shouldn't go 11-4, potentially even better during those 15 games, which would, you go 11-4, that puts you at 27-13 already.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about. Let's talk trades. Before we do, though, I should say this. I was just scrolling through Instagram before, and Melanie Ricks, who Bucks fans will know if you've been to a game at Five Star Forum, even if you watch on League Pass, you know who Melanie is. She's the in-arena host. She's doing all these games, all these interactions. She's a star. Well, going back a few weeks ago, she did a game on
Pistons
the
game.
sidelines. It was Pistons,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yep.
She's down in Miami, I saw, so she's back on the
Yeah.
sidelines tomorrow. So shout out to Mel because she's been around for many years, highly entertaining, and it's good to see that she's getting a shot. So shout out to Mel.
Yeah, shouts to Mel, who most listeners and viewers probably remember her most as, her and I were the co-hosts of Courtside Live, the very famous Courtside Live. So, yeah, but congrats to Mel.
Exactly right. Speaking of famous, LeBron is very famous, and something that LeBron loves is sleep. That's right. Sleep is his superpower. And Calm, the number one app for sleep and meditation, has teamed up with LeBron James to help you activate the power of sleep when it comes to athletes. Tend to focus on physical fitness, but sleep is to be a world champion to learn how to train it. Calm can help you keep your brain so you sleep better, help train your brain, I should say. You're always going to keep your brain, but it'll help you train your brain so you can sleep better, reduce your stress, and perform at your best, just like King James. For LeBron, sleep is a critical part of his mental fitness routine. So if you head to calm.com/lockedonnba for a limited time, you'll get 40% off a Calm premium subscription. Again, for a limited time, our listeners can join LeBron in using Calm and get a 40% discount on a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/lockedonnba. Unlock the content to help you focus, ease stress, and sleep better. Get started at calm.com/lockedonnba. That's calm.com/lockedonnba. I can hardly spit it out. It's because I didn't sleep so well last night. That's why I got to use Calm tonight. But I tell you what I did do today. I went for a bike ride. I mentioned this. I bought a bike. I'm trying to find ways to look after my knees. I've got terrible knees. But the point is, I went on a bike ride. Before I went on a bike ride, I had Built Bar. That's why I was able to power through. And that's why I'm able to do this podcast straight after a pretty lengthy ride. So, the holiday season is here. You can grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, or even better than a candy bar. Personally, in my opinion, Built Bar is filled with so much holiday goodness, rich and decadent flavor, covered in chocolate, but amazingly low in calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat, and high in protein, which is the good stuff right there. You get the best of both worlds. It's delicious and healthy. There are so many flavors. You can go to the website and check them all out. If you want to cozy up with something warm, here's a holiday secret. Dip your Built Bar into a piping hot cup of cocoa. I tell you what, I reckon the people writing this ad read have been listening to Locked On Bucks, because I was talking about dipping your Built Bar into milk. But if it's snowing outside, perhaps you do want to dip your Built Bar into a piping hot cup of cocoa. So anyway, you should try that out. Just go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right. Like I mentioned, we always thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of every single day. We really appreciate that. And of course, head over to Locked On Packers as well. They've got a game coming up this weekend after bye week, so get ready for that with Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers. Justin, trade season is nearly here. I mentioned that I was waking up to health and safety protocols. I'm also waking up to the Portland Trailblazers are in turmoil. The Indiana Pacers are in turmoil, which, by the way, I'm wearing this Malcolm Brogdon dunking on LeBron t-shirt right now. Those were the good old days, Justin, where just one little dunk like that would just... Shout out to him. One of my favorite shirts.
Those were certainly the good old days for Malcolm Brogdon, it seems like, at this point.
Wow, that's true.
I mean, I was so the two interesting teams are obviously Portland, and it feels like that was just a long time coming. That, the closer we get to the trade deadline, I think it's going to feel like, man, why didn't Damian Lillard just rip the Band-Aid off in the offseason and get this sorted out then? But the Pacers one, to me, it makes sense, but it still really surprised me to see the reports from today because, first and foremost, if you're 62-year-old Rick Carlisle, did you sign up for a rebuild?
Absolutely freaking not. which is why this situation is so fascinating, because the Pacers have been just so reliable. They've been such a reliable team that even though you never really considered them as contenders, and I never really have looked at any of these Pacers rosters, withstanding going back multiple years, Paul George, prime Roy Hibbert. I never really thought that the Pacers were a team that were going to contend, but you knew during the regular season they were going to be a tough team to beat, albeit they had a couple of series there where they were unlucky not to beat LeBron in some of those playoff series. The interesting thing to note with the Pacers, and we're going to tie this into the Bucks, of course, Bucks Twitter has been all over potential trades to bring in a center. Just from a Malcolm Brogdon perspective, while we're talking about him, he actually can't be traded because he extended his contract just prior to the season or whenever that date was there, which is kind of funny. Because again, when we look at how the teams in the we're all looking at is without doubt Philadelphia, and it's not a home run move, but when you look particularly over the last few weeks and the way it's panned out, and Ben Simmons still isn't playing, when you look at where his value is, it's certainly not Damian Lillard. It might be CJ McCollum, but we found out just recently he's got a punctured lung, which, by the way, you get punctured lung in a car crash, not in a game of basketball. But CJ McCollum is on the shelf as well. And Malcolm Brogdon is probably the guy with the emergence of Tyrese Maxey. You say, okay, this is maybe a guy. And in many ways, it's sad that that's where the value for Ben Simmons has dropped to. But if he's not playing, then it's not going to rise. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the Pacers do, but certainly from a Bucks perspective, Miles Turner, Justin, is the guy that a section of Bucks fans seem to be locking in on.
Miles Turner, I guess, of the guys on the roster makes the most sense, especially if you're having the Miles Turner versus Domantas Sabonis debate, that his skill set obviously fits much more nicely with the Bucks than Domantas Sabonis. He can defend. He's a better three-point shooter as well. And I think he just pairs alongside Giannis better. But, look, I get we don't know what's going to happen with Brook Lopez. That's still unknown. Back surgery for a player in his 30s and for a giant, you kind of hold your breath and see how does he come back from that. And I know the question was brought up to Bud the day that we learned of the back surgery of, is this we hope he can play again type of thing? And they were very non-committal on that. And all we know is we're not closing the door on him coming back this year. So I get the Miles Turner, hey, it would make sense here, but realistically, I mean, what do you have to give up if you're the Bucks? That I know everybody points to Dante, and we've talked about that earlier this year as well. To me, if you decide to move on from Dante DiVincenzo, it still seems like it makes the most sense to do it in the offseason as part of a sign and trade to bring back more salary. The Brook Lopez component, let's just entertain that and say, yeah, we're going to move on from Brook and we're going to trade him, which may bring some bad karma if you ride him to a championship, he has back surgery, and you trade him. But a very Danny Ainge-like move, that would seem like. But let's say you do that. And I know salary-wise it would match up of Brook and Dante for Miles Turner. Brook and Miles Turner both expire the same year. It's both 2 years left on the deal. Miles Turner's only making slightly more. If you're Indiana, why do you take that? We're bringing in a center that has the exact same contract in terms of years, values pretty similar too. And oh, by the way, we're rebuilding and we got to make a decision on Dante DiVincenzo, who's going to be a free agent in the summer. We got to pay him or decide what we're going to do with him. That it just makes no sense. It's great to have the pipe dream and say he's a younger guy that maybe he could do some of the things Brook did. He certainly can't do all of them. But to me, there's just no real avenue for that trade. And if Indiana was just saying, we're totally open for business, the guy on the roster that I would be most interested in is probably TJ Warren.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've never been enamored with Miles Turner as a player, first of all. I agree that he does have the attributes that, loosely fit what the Bucks would want from a big man. There's no doubt about that. But I would have to bet, if I was a betting man, that they're not trading Brook Lopez. But if you are a betting man or a betting woman, you can go to Bet Online. They have you covered for all the props, odds, and lines, and more than ever before, particularly with football season as it continues the march to the playoffs. Bet Online remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code Locked On to receive your bonus. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. Just to come back to the Brook Lopez conversation as we continue our chat here and the possibility or the potential that he would be traded, you already outlined it. I mean, I would just automatically remove Indiana as a potential target, because if they do decide to go full Reeves Turner, certainly there may be a team out there that would be willing to give a future first or whatever it may be for a player like Miles Turner, and whatever else they decide to move on. They're certainly not making a trade for two guys with, one with an extensive injury list in his first few seasons in the league, albeit Dante DiVincenzo, a real NBA player in my opinion, or a guy with a broken back. And we don't know it's a broken back, but whatever. He's gone in for back surgery. So no, I mean, I don't see that any way that a mental piece of winning an NBA championship only 6 months ago. I just don't see that they will trade him unless there was some guarantee that he was never playing basketball again. I just don't think they're going to do that. That's why I keep coming back to the point that, and again, I know he's just a buzz name and a familiar name, but that's why I keep going back to the point. If I do think that the Bucks are making a trade for a big man, I think it might be a few of the periphery pieces, and they'll get someone that will be a body that, when it gets closer to the playoffs, might be an emergency big in case Brook Lopez doesn't play. Zach Lowe was the latest I heard saying that he still thinks, he repeated again, that he still thinks there's optimism that within the Bucks that he will get back for the postseason. So again, it's just a name because, again, we know him, but the Robin Lopez type situation where you don't have to trade Brook. And maybe there's a couple of guys that they're at the end of your rotation that aren't really playing all that much anyway. Maybe you can work something out with some. I know the Bucks don't have a lot of picks. I haven't looked into this or thought this through too much, but future picks, whatever it is, you can figure something out with Orlando for a guy that outside of his proximity to Disney World, is not really playing basketball at all. There's no advantage for him to be down there in Orlando. So that's still the path I see them going down if they're going to bring in another big man. And the other thing is that I think is really interesting. I was thinking about this earlier today. In the Eastern Conference, obviously the Bucks' path out of the East and how they're going to make their way to the NBA Finals, it's Brooklyn that we're talking about. And, I mean, I don't, if the Bucks went out and traded for Miles Turner, for instance, to play against Brooklyn, or they traded for Robin Lopez to play against Brooklyn, I don't see either of those guys being a major factor in their ability to win the series anyway. And that's your main challenge in the Eastern Conference. So I don't know if that's me being...
No, I think we talked about this once before too, that look, my hesitation with Giannis at the 5 is just to put the mileage on him in the regular season. So I think like the moves like Boogie and Bobby Portis taking some of that load, that's helpful in the regular season, but ultimately in the playoffs, Brook Lopez, he served the need with the team. And you had, I thought towards the end, Bud did a masterful job of figuring out where are the spots I can use him and where is it going to be difficult. But we're moving closer and closer to Giannis is the 5, and you just figure out the components around him. So it's more about preserving some of those minutes and giving him some reprieve in the regular season where Boogie helps and where a guy like Robin Lopez would help. So that's where I think we're kind of aligned of, they have to start thinking about life after Brook as is, with 2 years left on the deal. And he's a guy that's in his 30s and he has been durable, but centers, you don't see him hold up all that long, as durable as Brook has been. So you got to start to think of the exit plan and plan B. And it's probably Giannis and just, a secondary guy that's going to take some of those regular season minutes. So that's where I think they're probably going to align on. And especially if you have this belief that Brook can come back in some form, that I think we've all kind of accepted. He's not going to be the guy he was last year, that you're going to have to massage him back in. Let's say he returns. It's not going to be heavy minutes, you wouldn't think. So I think that's clearly the most likely route they're going to go is someone like a Robin Lopez or something like that, another Boogie type of guy that just gives you a body that you can put out there for limited minutes, but it just preserves not having Giannis play 30 minutes at the 5 in the regular season.
And quite honestly, I mean, that was kind of the Robin Lopez role when he was here a couple of seasons ago anyway. I mean, he was an every night player during the regular season. Then as soon as you got to the postseason, he wasn't playing because obviously you had Brook playing those minutes. And then there is more, I guess, room to go small in the postseason there as well. So, yeah, it's going to be fascinating moving forward. Rather than the Bucks, I still think that the Bucks will tinker with the roster somewhat here. We'll see it. I've been big on this all season long. But if you can get Dante DiVincenzo back, this is a really good rotation NBA guy that you know that you can play in the playoffs. And for all the talk about the guys, I find it funny that there's criticism of guys like Ojale or Hood and all these guys. And we described them from the start. They're X factors. You're literally talking about your 12, 13, 14, 15th guy on the roster. They're not supposed to be there to be brilliant players night in and night out. Their form is going to fluctuate a little bit. They're in that position because of what they've been produced or what they haven't produced over previous years. Dante isn't that guy. He was starting on this team. He was starting on a really, really damn good team. He's a good player. So it's good to see him getting closer and closer to coming back on the court.
Well, and I mean, you think about that. You think about when George Hill, it's only been 2 games, but when George Hill comes back too, I mean, that probably means Rodney Hood is the one that's on the outside looking in, and it certainly would when Dante's back. So how the rotation starts to tighten up there. But I mean, also when we saw Wesley Matthews back on the floor, you can't help but salivate almost and look at some of these limited minute rotations they can use once they're healthier. And you have Giannis at the 5, and you have a backcourt potentially that's Drew Holiday and Wesley Matthews, and 2 guys that can certainly defend up and defend 1 through 4. And you can do that for limited spurts. We know Dante can do the same too. So versatility has been the word we've kicked around a lot with this team for the last 2 years. And to add a guy like Wes again, when you still have George that can do some of those things and Dante that can do that, it's the most versatile team we've seen here under Bud and under John Horst. And I know everybody is tossed around too. Ersan's certainly going to be the next one to return. Wouldn't it make more sense in the spirit of reunion, since that's what this season has been about for the Bucks, all of a sudden out of nowhere, John Henson is the guy that just rejoins the team, and it's, hey, John Henson's going to basically play that Robin Lopez role and be the guy that plays occasionally in the regular season.
Well, it's funny you bring up John Henson. As most listeners to the show will know, I'm doing a bunch of stuff with the Australian Basketball League this year, and I live in Melbourne. And Matthew Dellavedova, our old friend, is playing in Melbourne. And he asked me, I saw him a couple of weeks ago, and he asked me, he said, "Oh, did you feel jealous about the Bucks winning the title when you were in Australia?" And I said, "Oh, well, it would have been fun to be there for sure." I said, "Did you?" And he said, "No." And he said, no. He said, "I didn't." He's like, "I was happy for those guys. I was only really around the franchise for a little bit, and certainly not long when Bud was there." He goes, "I actually felt really bad for John Henson, who was with the Bucks for so long, through some terrible times. And then obviously they've had the success." And I thought it was interesting. I hadn't thought about John Henson for a while, but now that you bring him up, good point, Dally. Well done. That's an excellent point. We should wrap this up. Before we do, don't forget to check out the live for everything you need to know from a betting perspective. But let's wrap up this pod. And I have to say, I'm not sure if there's been some internet problems here in this podcast. I think there might have been. Australian internet has done it again. Honestly, quite surprising how well it's held up since we've moved to YouTube. But if there's anything a bit sketchy about this podcast, apologies. It's like, Australian is good for a lot of things, but one thing it's not good for is internet. So apologies for that. I'll see how much I can clean this up.
Yeah, I mean, and funny, it seemed like one of the glitches happened as soon as you said. It feels like we're having internet
really?
outages. Yeah, but no, it wasn't too much of a distraction. So it's fitting that we don't do it for a week, and when we return, this is what we have to deal with.
All right, let's wrap this pod. This is an absolute disaster. I'm Kane. He's Justin. We'll